Camera arts are recent extensions of a long pictorial tradition based on the desire to make lifelike images of our significant experiences. Photography has been influenced by Western painting and has in turn influenced not only painting but other art media. The history of photography is young, with a birthday year of 1839. It has been around merely 167 years. Photography literally means light writing. Photography can be either an art form or a practical tool. Beyond its many uses in journalism, science, advertising, public relations, as well as for recording history, photography offers the artist a powerful means of expression. The basic concept of photography was actually born during the Renaissance in the 16th century. Although there was not a process for retaining an image, the concept of using light to draw came from the invention of the camera obscura, which literally translates to dark room. The camera obscura was first described by Leonardo da Vinci in the 15th century, who described the device as an aid to observation and picture making. The camera obscura was basically a fixed room in which reflected sunlight passed through a small hole in the wall of a darkened room. The sunlight projected an inverted image onto the opposite wall of whatever was outside. In the 17th century, the camera obscura evolved into a portable light-tight box with a lens. From the 17th to 19th centuries, it became popular as a tabletop model. If you've seen the movie Girl with the Pearl Earring, you've seen an example of the camera obscura and how artists used it. In 1826, the first semi-stable photographic image was created by a printmaker named Joseph Nicéphore Niepce. His first attempts were called sun prints, however they weren't stable. What that means is that the image would eventually fade as it was exposed to the light. Simultaneously, in another part of Europe, the painter Louis Daguerre began developing similar processes. Daguerre and Niepce began collaborating around 1834 and continued until Niepce's death in 1837. Daguerre continued to persevere with his experiments until finally in 1839 he produced the first stable photographic image, which is called the daguerreotype. The photograph pictured here is a daguerreotype in which Daguerre created the first photograph of people. Daguerreotypes involved extremely long exposures, and because a man was getting his shoes polished, he stayed still long enough to become part of the image. This was a significant moment in history that ruffled the feathers of painters and printmakers. The invention of photography challenged the livelihoods of painters and printmakers, who made their livings either working for portrait commissions or reproducing artwork. Naturally, photographers were influenced by the traditions of portrait painting. Many 19th century photographers looked for ways to duplicate what painters had already done, and thereby failed to find their medium's strength. This added to the feeling that photography was not a legitimate art form. However, photographic practice would not go away, and eventually began to heavily influence art and art making. I'd like to introduce you to some important technical terms. The camera body is basically a light-proof box. The aperture is an opening on the light-proof box that lets light in. The lens is a convex glass, or sometimes plastic, optic that focuses light rays. The shutter is a curtain that opens or closes for a specific amount of time, letting light hit the film. Film is transparent sheets of plastic that are coated with a light-sensitive emulsion. When developed, film produces a negative or a positive depending on what type of film is used. Negative film produces a negative because light and dark areas are reversed. Slide film produces a positive. Photographic paper is basically sheets of opaque paper, either cotton or plastic, that are coated with a light-sensitive emulsion. Traditional black and white photographic paper uses a silver-based light-sensitive emulsion that is suspended in a sheet of gelatin. That's where the name gelatin silver prints comes from. One of the ways photography changed pictorial history was that it provided a vehicle for documenting subject matter that, prior to its invention, was not considered worthy of painting. Photographer Margaret Bourke-White introduced the concept of the photo essay in the early 20th century. She had her image printed on the first Life magazine cover in 1936. Margaret Bourke-White greatly influenced the way photography is used today in media. Ansel Adams, environmentalist and social activist, was a prolific master of the photographic medium from the middle of the 20th century until his death in 1985. Adams' black and white photographs, taken with an 8x10 format camera, reflect his passion for art and nature. Ansel Adams viewed aspects of nature as the symbols of spiritual life, capable of transcending conflicts of society. Photographers can combine media with their photographs as well. I'm showing you an image of mine. I titled this Earth Cycle Farm. This is from a project I'm working on titled Washington State Landscape Project. On this gelatin silver print, I painted it with oil. I use color to reference memory, atmosphere, and ephemera. Notice the composition is square. The film that I shoot is square. That refers to my format. I use 120mm film. This next photograph is one that I took outside of Cheney, Washington. This is also part of the same documentary project. I wanted to include this because this shows even a different format. This is a panorama camera. There's an artist lecture located in Module 2. The artist is Lois Connor. I'd like you to be sure to watch this. Lois Connor is an American photographer based in New York City. Connor uses a large format panorama camera. Now let's have a discussion about film and the moving image. The illusion of motion is made possible by the persistence of vision. This is the brief retention of an image by the retina of our eyes after a stimulus is removed, and by the process of perception, by which the mind attempts to make sense of incomplete information. A movie is a visual experience. Film's rhythmic, time-based structure makes motion picture photography a very different sort of visual art from painting or even still photography. A filmmaker must design sequences that work together in time as well as space. Filmmaker Sergei Eisenstein's major contribution to film history was his use of montage to heighten dramatic intensity. In the film The Battleship Potemkin, he created one of the most powerful sequences in film history, the terrible climax of a failed revolt. The montage of brief shots, edited into a sequence of no more than a few minutes, portrays the tragedy of the historic event. Rather than shoot the entire scene with a wide-angle lens, he took many close-ups to give the viewers a sensation of being caught in the action. The German documentary filmmaker Loni Riefenstahl, who died recently in December 2003, always shot Adolf Hitler from a lower vantage point, which made him look larger, thus implying power. See the image on page 13 of your text. Likewise, Riefenstahl shot the masses from an aerial perspective in order to signify their subordination. Riefenstahl's films were very successful political propaganda for Hitler. Photographers, filmmakers, and media sources like newspapers, magazines, or even the evening news manipulate our interpretation of leaders through angle or vantage point used in the composition. In the short history of video art, some artists have consistently tried to expand the limits of the medium's technical capacities. A leader in the movement is Korean-born artist Nam June-pak. With the help of foundation grants, he worked in partnership with Public Television Labs in Boston to develop the first video synthesizer. This could be programmed to develop from black and white input. Using it, he created the video Global Groove, a program that was broadcasted over a public television station in New York City. Nam June-pak was truly a pioneer for video art.